In the dying breath of the Wild West, where the wind still carried the cries of men who thought they were gods, one woman rode beneath a blood-red sky. Not for gold, not for glory, but for vengeance that had forgotten its own name. Her legend was buried in the dust, and tonight it would rise again. The desert was a furnace, endless and merciless. Heat shimmered off the horizon like ghosts trapped between worlds. Maeve Calder rode slow beneath it, a figure carved from dust and silence, her wide-brimmed hat shadowing eyes too tired to hate and too proud to cry. Her horse, a scarred chestnut with one blind eye, moved with the weary rhythm of things that had seen too much. The leather creaked beneath her, and every step left a print that the wind began to erase before it even formed. She hadn't spoken in 3 days. There was no one left to talk to. A storm was brewing far east, thunder rolling like old drums, the kind that used to announce cavalry raids or Indian wars. Now it was just weather, but it sounded the same. Everything in this land carried the echo of violence. Maeve reached the crest of a dune and pulled the bandana from her mouth. Her lips were cracked, her skin sunburned to the color of old whiskey. From her saddlebag, she pulled a single photograph, edges curled, image faded by sand and sweat. A man's face stared back, sharp jaw, eyes like frost. The name scrawled on the back in her own hand, Elias Vorn. Her voice came rough, barely a whisper. Almost found you. She folded the photo and tucked it back inside her coat. The wind changed direction, hot breath turning colder now, carrying the metallic scent of water and something else beneath it. Smoke. Her eyes narrowed. Down below, the valley opened into what used to be a town, or something that tried to be one. A handful of rotted buildings, a blacksmith's frame leaning sideways, and a church steeple cracked down the middle like it had been struck by God himself. A sign hung askew over the main street, barely legible through years of grit. Hollow Bend. She remembered the place, a watering stop for miners and thieves. Her gang used to drink here before Elias betrayed them all, before the canyon burned. She nudged her horse forward. The town was quiet, not the peaceful kind, the kind that waited for movement, for blood. Her boots hit the earth with a heavy thud as she dismounted. The air smelled of rust and ash. Somewhere, a door creaked on its hinges. She walked past the saloon first. Windows broken, bar inside stripped bare. Sunlight slanted through the gaps, catching motes of dust that hung like tiny ghosts. On the floor, a poker table lay overturned, cards still scattered across the boards. She paused, crouching to pick one up, the Queen of Hearts, its corners scorched. Figures, she muttered. Outside, the wind picked up again, whistling through the empty street. That's when she heard it, faint at first, then clearer, the low hum of someone singing. A woman's voice. Maeve's hand went instinctively to her revolver. She followed the sound toward the old chapel at the edge of town. The door hung open, moving lazily in the wind. Inside, the light was dim, filtered through holes in the roof, falling across rows of pews warped by heat and rain. The singing stopped. Church is closed, a voice called from the shadows. Maeve didn't move, didn't come to pray. A figure emerged, thin, sun-browned, a rifle cradled against her arm. She was young, maybe 20, wearing a threadbare dress and a look that didn't belong on a face so young, a look that had already buried too many things. "You from the north?" the girl asked, steady but wary. Maeve shook her head. "Just passing through." The girl's eyes flicked to her gun belt. "Don't look like passing through to me." Maeve took a slow step forward. The floorboards creaked. "Name's Calder." The girl blinked, recognition flashing for a split second before she hit it. "You're supposed to be dead." "Most days I am," Maeve said. The girl lowered the rifle just slightly. "What do you want here?" "Water," Maeve said, "and maybe a word with whoever's left." The girl gave a bitter laugh. "Ain't no one left but me, and I don't have much worth saying." Maeve studied her, the dirt under her nails, the scar on her neck. A survivor, just like her. "You seen a man come through?" Maeve asked. "Tall, black coat. Eyes like winter. Name's Elias Vorn." The girl hesitated. "Can't say I have." But she looked toward the back of the chapel. You might check the graveyard. A lot of folks came through here looking for redemption. Most found the dirt instead. Maeve nodded once, tipping her hat. Much obliged. As she turned to leave, the girl called after her. You really him? Maeve paused. Who? The ghost folks whisper about. The one who shot her own gang to save herself. Maeve didn't answer. She just kept walking, boots echoing through the hollow church, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the graveyard stretched like a field of bones. Wooden crosses leaned at strange angles, some names carved deep, others gone to rot. She moved between them, eyes scanning. Then she saw it. Fresh earth, darker than the rest. Someone had been here recently. Kneeling down, she brushed the dirt with her hand. A single spent bullet casing gleamed beside the mound. Her heart kicked once. She picked it up, turning it in the light. .45 caliber. Engraved at the base. A faint mark she knew too well. Ev. Her breath caught. He was close. By dusk, she'd set camp outside the town, fire low, wind biting. The sky was a deep bruise, streaked red and purple as if painted in blood. She sat staring at the flames, the bullet casing turning between her fingers. The world was quiet except for the slow shifting of the sand. Then, faintly hooves. She rose, drawing her revolver. The sound came from beyond the ridge. One rider, slow and deliberate. She waited, every muscle taut, until the shape appeared, dark silhouette against the dying sun. Her chest tightened. Elias Vorn. He reined his horse at a distance, studying her like a ghost staring at another. His hat was pulled low, his coat tattered, his face thinner than memory. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved between them like breath between prayers. Didn't think you'd come this far, he said finally, voice low, hoarse from dust. I always finish what I start, Maeve replied. His eyes softened just a flicker. Even when it kills you, especially then. A slow smile ghosted across his face, the kind that remembered everything and forgave nothing. Then I guess we both came home, he said. The wind shifted again, carrying ash across the firelight. Between them, the air burned with everything unspoken, love, hate, regret, and the terrible pull of something neither could escape. The night swallowed them whole, and somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder began to roll again. The thunder rolled closer through the night, deep and steady, like the sound of an old grudge remembering its own heartbeat. Elias and Maeve sat across a fire that barely burned, a flickering ring of orange in a sea of dark. The silence between them was older than words. Maeve poured coffee from the blackened pot, the liquid as bitter as the years that had passed between them. Elias took his cup without thanks, the gesture quiet, almost reverent. The desert stretched around them, still as glass. A place that had buried too many stories and didn't care to hear another. How long you been tracking me? He asked finally, his voice like gravel, soaked in whiskey. Long enough to see you left a trail a blind man could follow, she said. You getting sloppy, Elias. He smiled faintly. Or maybe I wanted you to find me. Maeve looked up, eyes catching the firelight. That why you left that bullet in Hollow Bend? Thought I'd take it as a love letter. He shrugged. Guess I always did write best in lead. She didn't smile. The old ache pressed beneath her ribs again, the one he'd carved years ago in the canyon where her gang burned. You killed 5 men that night, she said. I saved 1, he answered. The words hung there, dry and heavy as ash. She turned her gaze to the fire, unable to meet his eyes. Don't do that, she whispered. Do what? Talk like you were ever a savior. You shot them down to save your own damn skin. Elias didn't flinch. And you didn't? Her jaw tightened. The truth in his voice cut deeper than the lie ever could. The storm moved closer, wind kicking dust through the camp. The flames twisted, throwing shadows across their faces. 2 ghosts caught between what they were and what they'd become. By dawn, the rain started. It came soft at first, tapping the brim of her hat, rolling down her leather coat. The desert breathed for the first time in months. They rode side by side through the storm, the horizon vanishing behind sheets of gray. Elias kept glancing her way, as if trying to see the woman she used to be beneath the grit and silence. You still hum when you ride? he said quietly. Maeve frowned. Don't remember that. You used to, he said. Back when you thought the world still had songs in it. The memory hit her like a stray bullet. Nights around a fire, her boots kicked up on a saddle, humming tunes her mother used to sing before everything went to dust. Elias sitting nearby, tuning his revolver instead of the guitar, smiling in that quiet, broken way of his. Songs don't help out here, she muttered. Neither does silence. She shot him a glance sharp enough to cut. You talk too much for a man who's supposed to be dead. He grinned faintly. Guess I ain't much good at staying that way. The rain thickened, turning the ground to red mud. Their horses struggled, hooves sinking deep. They reached a dry canyon by midday, sheltering beneath a rock ledge slick with runoff. Maeve built a small fire while Elias stripped off his coat, the fabric soaked through. His shirt clung to his frame. Lean muscle, old scars, the map of a man who'd been remade by violence and regret. She tried not to look. Failed. Still carrying that same scar? She asked, nodding toward the puckered mark near his ribs. He glanced down. You gave me that one. Her hands paused on the kindling. Did I? Canyon fight. You meant to kill me, but you hesitated. She smirked bitterly. Guess I still regret that. He met her gaze, long, unblinking. No, you don't. Something passed between them then, a silence not of anger, but memory, a kind of tenderness that had no place in this wasteland. Maeve looked away, feeding another stick to the fire. Don't start remembering me kindly, Elias. It won't end well. Too late, he said softly. The rain stopped by evening, but the storm hadn't left them. It just moved inside, into the space between breaths, between words. They camped again in the open, no fire this time. The air smelled of wet earth and mesquite, the moon half hidden behind clouds. Maeve lay awake, hat over her eyes, pretending to sleep. Elias spoke after a long while. You ever think about what we might have been if things had gone different? She didn't answer. He continued anyway. If I hadn't pulled that trigger, if we just run instead of fighting? Her voice came low, barely more than wind. We'd be dead by now. Maybe, he said, but we'd have died knowing who we were. She turned her head then, eyes catching the faint silver of moonlight. And who's that, Elias? Outlaws? Lovers? Liars? He smiled sadly. All of it, maybe. A beat passed. Then, you think we still got souls left? He asked. Maeve thought of all the people she'd buried. All the nights she'd woken to the sound of her own breath shaking. If we do, she said, they ain't clean enough for heaven, and too stubborn for hell. He chuckled softly. Sound about right. She turned away again, but her voice softened. Sleep, Elias. You'll need your strength. Someone's following us. He froze. You sure? I saw smoke this morning. Same ridge, 2 days running. You think it's Pinkertons, she said. Or worse. He nodded grimly. Then we keep moving at first light. Maeve didn't reply. Her eyes stayed open long into the night, watching the embers fade. The next morning, they rode fast through red canyons and skeletal scrub, the air sharp and cool. The rain had washed the world clean, but the tracks behind them were deep and wet, easy to follow. At midday, Maeve spotted them. 3 riders, black coats, rifles glinting. The past had finally caught up. Elias looked over his shoulder, saw the dust, and swore under his breath. You could have left me, he said. I could have, she replied, spurring her horse faster. But you'd have done the same. He gave a humorless laugh. You still don't know me, Maeve. She glanced at him. You'd be surprised. The canyon walls closed in around them, narrow, winding. Gunfire cracked behind. The sound echoed like thunder, bullets biting into rock. They rode harder. Elias's horse stumbled but recovered. Maeve drew her revolver, turned in the saddle, and fired 2 shots blind. One hit stone, one screamed close enough to make a man duck. The pursuers slowed, regrouping. Up ahead, Elias shouted. There's a pass. They broke into the open again, hooves hammering the wet earth. The sky cleared just enough for the sun to pierce through, pale and merciless. When they finally stopped, breathless and bruised, the riders were gone. Maeve dismounted, legs shaking with exhaustion. We bought some time, she said. Elias leaned against his horse, panting. You always did like to dance with death. She smirked. He's the only partner that don't complain. He laughed thin, real, unguarded, the kind of sound she hadn't heard in years. And for a fleeting heartbeat, it almost felt like the world hadn't ended. That night, their fire burned low again. Maeve sat cleaning her revolver, Elias staring into the dark. You still chasing vengeance, he said finally, or just ghosts? Does it matter? It does to me. She looked up. Why? Because if you're still hunting me, I need to know whether it's to kill me or to forgive me. Her throat tightened. I ain't figured that out yet. He nodded slowly. Then I guess we keep riding till you do. She met his gaze, and this time didn't look away. The wind carried the scent of fire again, faint but growing. The hunters were still out there. And tomorrow, the desert would bleed once more. Dawn came slow, a thin ribbon of red light bleeding through the canyons, painting the world in the colors of old wounds. Maeve woke before the sun. The wind carried that same faint scent again. Smoke, gun oil, men. She rose, quiet as the dead, and watched the eastern ridge. Somewhere beyond that jagged horizon, the riders were closing in. Elias stirred beside the fire, hand already reaching for his Colt. The motion was muscle memory, too fast, too practiced. They're close, she whispered. He didn't ask how she knew. He just looked at her, saw the same grim fire in her eyes, and nodded once. Then it ends today, he said. Maeve shook her head. No, it just begins. They broke camp fast. No fire, no trace. The horses were restless, nostrils flaring. The desert felt alive with tension, like the air itself held its breath. They rode into the open flats north of the canyon, where the land stretched bare for miles. No cover, no second chances. Maeve glanced back once and saw them. 3 riders, black coats cutting the rising sun, dust trailing behind like smoke from gun barrels. Pinkertons, or bounty men, maybe both. Men who'd been promised gold to bring back what was left of 2 ghosts who'd refused to stay buried. Elias rode ahead, scanning the ridges. There's an old settlement east of here, burned out during the fever years. We can hole up there. Maeve didn't argue. She didn't have to. They both knew what a burned town offered: cover, ammunition, and graves already dug. By the time they reached Red Hollow, the sun was a white brand in the sky. What had once been a mining town was now nothing but charred timber and silence. The wind moaned through the church steeple, the bell long gone, the cross blackened. They dismounted in the square. Elias checked his rifle. Maeve tied her horse loose, scanning the edges for movement. You ever think, he said quietly, that maybe this is where it all ends for us? Not with justice. Not with peace. Just dust. Maeve glanced at him. I stopped thinking about endings a long time ago. He smiled faintly. Then you're braver than me. Before she could answer, the first shot rang out. The sound cracked the silence like thunder. A bullet struck the trough beside her, splintering wood and spraying water. Maeve dove for cover, drawing her revolver. Elias rolled behind a stone wall, rifle up. They're here, he shouted. 3 riders appeared on the ridge, rifles glinting in the sun. Their horses screamed as they descended the slope, gunfire echoing off the rock. Maeve fired back. One shot clean caught the lead rider in the shoulder. He fell, tumbling into the dust. Elias took aim at the second. His bullet caught the man's hat, spinning it into the air before he ducked behind a wagon. The third rode wide, circling, trying to flank them. Left side, Maeve yelled. Elias turned, fired, missed. The rider's return shot hit the post beside Maeve's head, with splinters biting into her cheek. Blood. She didn't feel the pain, only the heat, the familiar rush. The world slowed, like it always did when death came calling. They held out for what felt like hours, ducking between the bones of houses, trading bullets and curses. The sound of gunfire echoed off the cliffs, swallowed by the wind. When the dust settled, 2 men were down. One was crawling through the mud, the other face first in the dirt, hat half buried. The third, the one who'd circled them, was nowhere to be seen. Maeve scanned the rooftops. He's still out there. Elias reloaded, breathing hard. You hit bad. She wiped the blood from her cheek. I've had worse. He gave her a long look, half concern, half admiration. You always say that, and I always mean it. They started toward the horses, slow and wary. That's when Elias stopped, eyes narrowing. Maeve, he said quietly. She turned. The last rider stood behind her, rifle leveled, 30 feet away. He was young, too young. Maybe 20. Scared, sweating, finger trembling on the trigger. His badge gleamed faintly beneath the dust. Don't, Elias said, stepping forward. You don't want this. The boy's eyes flicked to him, then back to Maeve. You're wanted, he said hoarsely. Both of you, dead or alive. Maeve met his gaze. Then you best make up your mind which it's going to be. He hesitated, just long enough. Elias fired first. The boy fell before his gun ever went off, the shot echoing across the hollow like the toll of a church bell. Maeve turned slowly to Elias, eyes cold. You didn't have to. He was going to pull that trigger, Elias said. You don't know that. He holstered his gun, face hard. Yeah, I do. Something broke between them then. Not a sound, not a word. Just that thin, invisible thread that had held them together since the canyon years. Maeve stepped closer, her voice low, dangerous. You think you get to play God again? Decide who lives, who dies. I saved your life, he snapped. You killed what was left of mine. The silence that followed was unbearable. The wind moved through the hollow, lifting ashes from the ground. Ashes that clung to their boots, to their faces, to their memories. Elias turned away first. You gonna shoot me too, Maeve? She stared at him, revolver trembling in her hand. Then she lowered it. Not today, she said. You ain't worth a bullet. He nodded slowly. Then I guess we're done. Maeve didn't stop him when he mounted his horse and rode out into the heat haze, disappearing into the shimmer of distance. The silence left behind felt like punishment or maybe mercy. She walked to where the boy had fallen. Kneeling, she closed his eyes with shaking fingers. He couldn't have been more than her brother's age, back before the wars. The sky above her burned red with sunrise, a fire that never ended. And for the first time in years, Maeve felt something break inside her. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was the terrible, empty space where love used to be. She sat there until the sun was high, the wind whispering through the ruins. Somewhere out there, Elias was riding toward whatever hell waited for him. And she would have to live with what they'd done. The fire had burned everything clean, but it hadn't left her pure. Only hollow, only haunted. The rain came out of nowhere. It started as dust carried on the wind, then turned to ash, then to water. By dusk, the desert had become a scarred ocean of mud and sorrow. The sky, swollen and red, hung low enough to touch. And for the first time in years, Maeve thought she could almost hear God breathing. She'd been riding for 2 days since Red Hollow. No fire, no sleep, just the sound of her horse's hooves slapping against the earth and the ghosts following behind her. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew what she was running from. The boy's face, Elias's voice, her own hands trembling as she buried what was left of her faith in that hollow. Every outlaw dies twice, once when the law finds them, and again when the truth does. Maeve was long past the first. The second was catching up. The rain thickened by nightfall. The wind turned cruel, slicing her cheeks raw. She found shelter in the ruins of a way station. A roof half collapsed, and the sign outside bleached to nothing. Inside, it smelled of rot and old whiskey. She led her horse in, tied it near the back, then sank to the floor beside a cold stove. For a long time, she just listened to the rain drumming, to her heartbeat, to the way silence filled all the spaces she didn't have words for. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. Slow. Measured. Too heavy to be a ghost. Maeve rose, hand instinctively falling to her revolver. The door creaked open, and there he was. Elias. Soaked through, eyes sunken, jaw hard. The same man, and not the same at all. Didn't think you'd make it this far, she said, her voice roughened by exhaustion. He stepped in, rain dripping from his hat. Didn't think I'd see you again. Maeve holstered her gun, but didn't sit. What do you want, Elias? He looked at her for a long moment. To finish it, They stared at each other across the dim room, lightning flashing through the cracks in the roof. Two ghosts outlined in white fire. "Finish it how?" she asked finally. "By telling the truth," he said. "For once." She almost laughed. "Truth don't buy us much out here." "No," he said quietly. "But it's all we got left." He stepped closer, the floor creaking beneath his boots. "That boy back there, I shouldn't have pulled the trigger. I know that now." Maeve's jaw clenched. "Knowing don't change it." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Elias said. "I just need you to understand. I saw his face, and for a second, I saw mine. Back when I still believed we were the good ones." Maeve's eyes softened barely. "And what do you believe now?" He swallowed hard. "That there ain't no good ones left." The silence that followed felt like confession. Heavy, sacred, unforgiving. Maeve finally sat, pulling her coat tighter. "So what now, preacher?" she said, bitterness curling in her tone. "You ride with me till the end? Or put me in the ground like all the others?" Elias took off his hat, ran a hand through his wet hair. "I didn't come here to kill you, Maeve." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated, then spoke like the words hurt to say. "Because I can't seem to stop following you." Something flickered across her face, pain, disbelief, memory. She turned away. "You don't get to say that. Not after Red Hollow. Not after the canyon. You made your choice." "I did," he said softly, "and I've been dying by it every day since." The wind howled through the broken boards, scattering ash across the floor. Maeve's hands trembled in her lap. She hated that he could still make her feel anything but hate. She looked up at him, the man who once swore he'd die for her, and nearly did. "You want the truth, Elias? Fine." She stood, stepping closer until there was nothing but breath between them. "You think you shot that boy to save me? You didn't. You did it because you're still trying to prove you're better than the rest of us." His jaw tightened. "And what does that make you?" She smiled, slow and cold. "Honest." The thunder cracked, shaking the rafters. For a heartbeat, the world was lit in white flame. Their faces inches apart, reflections of each other's ruin. Elias looked at her then, really looked, and saw the woman beneath the scars. The one who used to laugh at the stars and whisper that the world could still be kind. The one he left bleeding in that canyon 5 years ago. He stepped forward, voice breaking. "I never stopped looking for you." Maeve's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed hard. "You should have kept writing." He reached for her hand. She didn't move, didn't pull away. The touch was small, human, undeserved. But it was real. "I ain't asking for your forgiveness," he said. "Just let me walk beside you. Until it ends." Maeve closed her eyes. The rain eased outside, replaced by the slow crackle of lightning far off. "You'll regret it," she whispered. "I already do." They stayed like that, two broken sinners clinging to the last warmth in a world gone cold. The storm outside began to fade, but inside, something else burned, small, dangerous, unholy. By dawn, the fire in the stove was dying, and so were they, though neither said it aloud. Maeve stirred first, rising to check the window. Out beyond the ridges, faint silhouettes moved against the horizon. More riders. A dozen maybe. Pinkertons? Elias asked. "Or worse," she said. "You still want to walk beside me, preacher?" He loaded his rifle, the faintest ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Looks like I don't have much choice." Maeve returned the smile, tired, broken real. "Then saddle up. The devil's mercy don't wait for anyone." They rode out into the storm's dying breath. The world around them washed clean, but not forgiven. The sky hung heavy with smoke and the color of rust, the kind of dawn that felt like judgment. Side by side they rode, the distance closing between them and the end of all things. For the first time in her life, Maeve Calder didn't know whether she was running from death or riding toward it. And maybe that was mercy, too. The desert was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that promised peace, but the kind that came after too much noise, the hush of the world catching its breath. Dawn crawled over the ridges in slow, golden ribbons, touching the blackened bones of the battlefield. Maeve Calder stood alone among the dead. Her hat was gone, her duster torn to ribbons, one sleeve dark with blood that wasn't all hers. Around her lay the wreckage of what had been their last stand. broken rifles, burnt wagons, horses half buried in sand. The smell of powder still clung to the air. Elias was nowhere to be seen, but his horse was still saddled, reins dragging, eyes wide and glassy. The wind tugged at the empty stirrup, as if to remind her that ghosts ride lighter than men. She walked to the ridge, overlooking the flats, the ground soft beneath her boots. Every step felt heavier than the one before. She didn't need to look far. She knew where he'd fallen. The blood trail ended in a hollow beneath a mesquite tree, its branches split by lightning. Elias lay on his back, eyes half open to the morning sky, the faintest trace of a smile on his lips. The rain had washed his face clean. He looked almost young again. Maeve knelt beside him, hand trembling as she brushed dust from his coat. "You always did chase storms," she whispered. "Guess one finally caught you." For a long time, she just sat there, listening to the wind hum through the branches, to the faint creak of the saddle behind her. She wanted to cry, but couldn't. There were no tears left in her, only the dry ache of something too deep for words. She buried him with her bare hands. No prayer, no marker, just a handful of stones and the old coin he used to flip before every fight. She placed it on the mound and whispered, "Heads you rest, tails you haunt me." The coin gleamed once in the sunlight, then dulled beneath the dust. When she stood, her knees ached and her palms were raw. The world stretched endless before her. Red mesas, pale sky, the faint shimmer of heat already rising. Somewhere out there lay the border, and beyond that, a land that didn't know her name. She thought of turning back once, of lying down beside him and letting the sun take them both. But the wind shifted, carrying a faint sound. Hooves, far off, too light to be pursuit. Maybe just the echo of what once was. Maeve pulled her hatband tight around her wrist, slung her rifle, and began walking. By midday, she reached the old road that wound through the basin. The signpost still stood, though the words had been eaten by rust. She remembered it from years ago, back when she and Elias had ridden through as outlaws with dust in their teeth and laughter in their lungs. That had been before everything broke, before love turned to loyalty and loyalty to blood. She stopped at the edge of a dried creek bed and looked down. Her reflection shimmered faintly in a pool of rainwater. Eyes sunken, jaw set, hair streaked with gray and ash. For the first time, she saw not the gunslinger or the fugitive, but the survivor. And maybe that was worse. She crouched, scooped up a handful of water, and let it fall through her fingers. "Guess this is what mercy looks like," she murmured. Ugly, quiet, but still moving. The sun was low when she reached the chapel. It stood alone on a rise, walls half-caved, the cross at its peak tilting like it had lost its faith halfway through the years. She pushed open the door. Inside, dust danced in slanted light, and a few pews still clung to shape. On the altar, a cracked Bible lay open to a page warped by heat. Maeve walked down the aisle, her spurs clicking softly. She set her revolver on the rail and sat, staring at the empty space where the window used to be. Through it, the horizon bled orange and violet, colors that looked almost like forgiveness. For the first time in a long while, she spoke aloud. "I don't know who's listening. Maybe no one. Maybe that's the point. You took the good ones, and you left me. I don't blame you for it, but I don't thank you either. I'm just still here." The words drifted up, lost in the dust and the failing light. When night fell, she lit a small fire by the doorway. The flames threw shadows across the walls, tall, wavering shapes that looked like men on horseback, like the ghosts of the gang, like Elias standing in the storm with his rifle and that same damn smile. She didn't turn away from the sight. She let it burn itself into her memory, into whatever part of her heart was still capable of feeling. She whispered to the dark, "I'll keep riding, Elias. Not for the gold, not for the legend. Just to see what's left of the world when it stops remembering us." The wind answered, soft as a sigh. She slept beneath the broken roof, and for the first time in years, she dreamed, not of gunfire, but of rain, and of two riders laughing somewhere beyond the horizon. Morning. The sky was pale and clean, as if the desert had finally forgiven itself. Maeve saddled her horse and mounted slow, every movement deliberate, reverent. The road stretched ahead, nothing but heat and distance. She looked once more toward the chapel. A crow sat on the crossbeam, black against the dawn. It cawed once and took flight, wings cutting the sky. Maeve touched the brim of her hat. Then she spoke softly, the words carried by wind. Redemption ain't a place you reach. It's the road that don't end. She clicked her heels, and the horse moved forward. The trail wound down the ridge, vanishing into light. And as the sun climbed over the desert, the last of the night burned away, leaving only dust, silence, and a single rider carving her way across eternity.